Hi there, welcome back to my channel. Today we're creating a simple but adorable companion page to this feature snow globe page that I created several weeks back using the Snow Days collection. We're going to talk about ways to create a second page that complements a feature scrapbook layout. Whether you're working on expanding a single page design or looking for ways to include more photos, I hope you find these tips useful. I have a few more photos here of Waylon James, my youngest grandson. On the feature page, he's decorating the tree or playing with the tree. And I want to use a few more photos to finish out my theme. And I've created 4 2x2 photos on my Epson PictureMate 400. I've given them a 1/4 inch white willow photo mat that is 2 1/4 by 2 1/4. Now the first thing that we're going to want to do is match our color palette and many of the icons. What we do to one page, we should do similarly with the other. I use the coordinating Snowy Wonder Stampin' die set on the left page, and I'll be using some of the leftovers and creating some more with the companion page. One of the easiest ways to create a cohesive look is by matching the color palette of your feature page. So for the companion page, I'm going to use some of the same cardstock colors: white willow, real red, garden green, and pool party, which are also on the feature page. This keeps the two pages visually connected and makes them feel like part of a set. We're going to repeat some key design elements. So repeating specific elements from your feature page is a great strategy. So first I'm going to repeat the base layers by putting the pool party triangle paper on the base and cutting a 1 inch by 11 inch frame all the way around to gut that. I'm also going to make my white willow piece a 10 by 10 and add a 10 1/8 by 10 1/8 real red piece, which matches the feature page exactly. And then I used a black lip pen to add lines to the white willow piece on the original. So I repeated the process here. And then later we're going to add some of the same snowman, maybe a house or two, and some of the same trees, as repetition creates balance and harmony between the two pages. I have some 2.5 by 2.5 inch squares here that are left over from the Snowy Days pattern paper. I'm going to cut those in half on a diagonal by putting each point in the trough of the trimmer and trim straight down. Now sometimes if you go straight on to the points of a square, you can push the tips of the square in. So a good tip is to actually start your blade in the center of the square. But we're going to create a different but similar layout structure. When creating a companion page, you really want to consider mirroring or loosely following the structure of your feature page. So for example, if the feature page has a large focal area, like my oversized snow globe shaker window, I'm going to use a similar size focal point on the companion page to keep a balanced design. You can adjust the placement and the ingredients to keep it fresh, but keep it cohesive. So I'm going to add a grid style square to the right page that is a large focal element that takes up about the same size as the oversized snow globe on the left page. But I'll want to add some more photo space. In an effort to keep some of the elements cohesive, I'm actually going to take my black lip pen and I'm going to draw on the interior of each of those triangles, and just adding those lines with the black lip pen really adds a lot to those triangles. Now I kept one square, different square of the houses, the house pattern paper, a 2.5 by 2.5, and also drew lines around that. Now what I want to do is I want to add another layer, and this piece is 8.5 by 8.5. I want to create a grid style on the interior of the 8.5 by 8.5 by making squares out of the triangles, and I want there to be white space on the outer edge of the 8.5 by 8.5 square. I also want some white space between the triangles and around the triangles to help those patterns to pop. And by using similar patterns on the right page or the same patterns on the right page that were used on the left page, it really creates a cohesive set, and the two will look like they go completely together. Now, I have some difficulty keeping things straight. It's difficult for me, and I usually do things that are more hodgepodge so that I don't have to have the stress of keeping things straight. But I'm going to actually create some additional squares that are 2 3/4 by 2 3/4. Now, you don't have to. If you feel that you can use a straight edge and you can get your triangles onto the 8.5 by 8.5 and leave the proper amount of space in between. But I'm going to go easy on myself, and I'm going to create 9 2 3/4 by 2 3/4 willow white squares, white willow squares. That way I can center my triangles onto those squares, then center those squares on top of my larger 8.5 by 8.5 inch square. Now, if you think that that's wasteful of your white willow paper, definitely go ahead and arrange these directly onto your 8.5 by 8.5. But honestly, this creates way less work for me and way less ripping pieces back up again because I didn't get them even. No matter how hard I try sometimes, even with a T-ruler or a straight edge, I find it difficult. And how easy was that for me to get the proper spacing right on those squares? So the first thing I do is just line up with that little bit of a white edge on the 2 3/4 by 2 3/4 white square. Then I line up the bottom triangle with that same amount of space on the bottom, and it leaves a perfect gap in between the triangles. Now, some of these triangles are going to be covered up with photos, and that is the beauty of being able to add companion pages that allow you to include more photos without overcrowding the feature layout. I love to have a feature or a focal layout that has the wow factor, but have a little bit more functional photo opportunities on the right page. Now, I'm only adding 4 2x2 photos on this, and definitely if you have more photos, you could use flip flaps and add more photos. You could use larger photos over the top of the grid if you wanted to. You could also leave room for journaling and embellishments, because this really helps to complete the story while keeping the design nice and clean and organized and matchy-matchy with the left page. Now, while I'm getting the squares together on the grid, another idea for companion pages to make the pages flow together, you can consider aligning elements across the spread. So for example, if I had, say, hexagons on the left page, I might extend the hexagons across the edges of both pages so they appear to be one continuous design. You could also use strips of pattern paper or borders or ribbon or just about anything that spans across both pages for a seamless look. A lot of times I'll do that if I have zip strips or strips of paper that are at the bottom or the top of the page. I have them expand across both pages to make the pages look cohesive. Now, this one is a similar focal element, but it's actually going to be a completely separate page, so I don't need to do that. But it's going to be something that you could use in the future, that is something that you can keep in mind that helps the two pages look cohesive. Now, I'm going to add these 2x2 photos with the photo mats. And I think that I like having them in kind of a diamond pattern, one at the middle top, middle left, middle bottom, and middle right. And I did pop those up with foam tape. So now let's take a look at the layouts together, and let's just check for elements. We want to be able to be consistent and use the same like stamp sets, die cuts. If you have certain lettering for a title, you would want to use the same one. You can add a little bit more words that would coordinate in some way with the theme through the stamp set. Of course, just like the feature page, I'm going to layer some trees. So I had created some trees out of the green dot pattern, also out of the front side and back side of garden green. green so that there were some light and dark trees. I had some snowmen on the left page. I had a little penguin up at the top of the left page. And there's also some striped and green and a little bit of pool party dovetailed banners on the focal page, and we may want to incorporate something similar to that on the right page. Now I have some elements left over that were already in my die set. I had a couple snowmen, a couple penguin, I had one little brown house that I had stamped. And again, I will link in the description the process video or the full process video on how to create the adorable shaker window layout, and you can check that out. I also do go over all of the materials and supplies that I used to create that layout and this one. This layout is actually part of my 12-page Sparkle and Shine Snow Days workshop, and I think tomorrow or Tuesday I'll be doing a video that shows one paper theme 3 ways, and I'll be showing my completed company 6-page workshop. My 10-page simple scrappin and my 12-page Sparkle and Shine will be completely revealed. So now I want to take the white willow piece here and make a dovetailed banner, and that white willow piece is, let's see, approximately 1 3/4 inches by approximately 1 3/4 inches. And then I've dovetailed that, and I'm going to stamp in Memento Black, Let It Snow. And I think that's going to tie the 2 pages together. So I have the title on the left page, there's Snow Place Like Home. And then we're going to add some of those snowmen and some of those bits and pieces and do a little bit of popping up and layering and texture, just like we did on the left page. We had some of the snowmen on the left page popped up, some of them were flush, some of the trees were popped up, and some of them were flush. And then, of course, when we're finishing our layout out, we're going to want to, in some way, incorporate the embellishments that we incorporated on the left page. So we're going to try to incorporate some of those acrylic snowflakes, and then also the peppermints. The peppermints are just so adorable, and I've used those peppermints. I just really, really love that wonderful bright red. So when I look at the snow globe, that's how I incorporated the snowflakes, is they were the only place on that layout where the snowflakes were inside the snow globe. But I also know there's a lot of pool party behind the snow globe. So I think we can add pool party to the Let It Snow and bring in a little bit of the pool party there. And then maybe looking at a diagonal across the page, we have the dovetailed strips up in the upper right of the feature page. Let's add a couple little paper strips to the lower right of the right page and another little peeking penguin. So we have that peeking penguin up above theirs, and then we can add a diagonal, which does kind of help our eye to go all the way across the page. So you could go across, draw your eye across somewhat like a visual triangle, but it draws it across from the upper left all the way down to the lower right. Now the green strip is about 1/4 inch by I'm thinking about 2.5 inches, and the peppermint stripe is about 1.5 inches by 1/2 inch, and it doesn't really matter. I literally didn't measure those. I just looked at scraps that I had on my table that would work, and then it creates quite a bit of balance there. So we have some of the peppermint stripe on the left, some of the peppermint stripe on the right. We have the green elements. We have a peeking penguin. We have trees. We have snowmen. We have all of the same colors with the pool party, let's see, garden green and the real red. I'm just going to use my take a pick tool, and I'm going to add 3 little snowflakes just to tie in the right page with the left page, and then we'll look at those peppermints and add those peppermints. If you haven't already checked out the video where I created the feature layout with the oversized snow globe shaker window, it's linked in the description, and other videos that I use the same collection on are also linked in the description. And just a recap here, matching your color palette, repeating key design elements, using a similar layout structure, adding a little more photo space, connecting the pages with a visual flow, and incorporating similar embellishments on the left and the right pages to create a perfectly matching coordinating companion page to your focal layout. I hope these tips have been helpful and that you will hit like, subscribe, the notifications bell, and you will come back soon for more. I've also had paper crafters out there that have shared with me their take on my snow globe layout. So I hope if you recreate it and you also create the companion page, that you'll find me out there on my other social media platforms such as Facebook or Instagram and post and share your completed layout. Nothing does my heart more good than sharing the love of paper crafting and seeing and being inspired by all of your crafty creations. Come back soon, right here for more on Snips by Kelly.